again, welcome to RTST. The third time, and for the third time I'm going to say, this is being shot at the Ollie Agency, and because this is the third time I'm actually getting it right, Ollie Agency is an commercial interior design company located at 717 Richmond Street, London, Ontario. All the businesses that support us, Up Like 7 Barbershop, the Fix Hair Salon, Weed Community Center, Rhythm Movements Community Association. The beautiful thing about Rhythm Movements Community Association is that they're located in Ottawa and they've been with us from day one. So I always got to send a very big shout out to Rhythm Movements Community Association. And our last sponsor that just came aboard is Paradigm Bar and Grill, the very first establishment of its kind in London, Ontario. So I got to send a big shout out to the management, to Jiggy, Mr. Adrian, and the whole crew, right? Getting into today's topic, the biracial experience. Everybody in this room has experience with biracial families. So at some point we're all going to talk about the family dynamic. We're going to talk about what it is to raise a person. And I'm going to say specifically in London, Ontario, because we all know London, Ontario has its challenges. So my very first guest that we're going to ask, I'm going to ask a few questions. I'm going to see if I can get some deep answers. Once again, Kwame Lambert from, what am I going to say? United Cuts. United Cuts Hair Salon, right? So I'm going to ask you a little bit about United Cuts. I'm going to let you introduce United Cuts. Give me a 2-minute thing on United Cuts.
United Cuts is a barbershop that we started back in 2007. I actually received the keys for that location on my 28th birthday, and I've been there since then. I'm 147 King Street. Yeah, it's been going really well. Great following within the community, and a great group of barbers that work there as well too.
All right, so that's our plug for United Cuts, right? Yeah. Kwame, your dad.
Yes, I am.
And that's why you're here, right?
Yeah.
Do I get to ask how many kids?
Yeah, you could ask. 6 kids, yeah. 3 boys and 3 girls.
3 girls, okay.
Brady Bunch.
The Brady Bunch. How many of them are biracial?
Out of the 6, well, of all of them really, because
Okay.
even my eldest son,
Yeah.
his mom is Jamaican and Chinese.
Oh,
mix,
okay, okay.
So, yeah. The other 5 are directly Canadian and Caribbean mix.
Okay, and are they all from London, Ontario?
Yes, they are. One's from Kitchener, but the rest from
Okay,
Kitchener,
okay.
yeah.
What's the age of the oldest?
Ages range from 21 to 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, first thing I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask everybody this, so everybody that comes up here, you know this is going to be your first question. What are the challenges of raising a biracial kid in London, Ontario?
Yeah, I mean, well, raising a biracial kid anywhere, in any city across Canada, obviously would be tough within itself. In London, it's extremely difficult because, it's a city that sort of lacks, well, has been lacking in the culture and the experience on both sides for a child coming up, where they can get the Caribbean Canadian experience or the African Canadian experience along with the European Canadian experience as well. So that brings its challenge within itself. So we've had a few difficulties with that itself, but we've been able to overcome it.
Okay. In terms of your kids, has any one of them ever come to you and said, "Hey, Dad, we're having issues"?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times from young, I've had my kids come to me and bring up different issues within the school about their race and things like that. I sometimes use my own story to help them of how I ended up in London and why I stayed in London. Because I moved here at 14 years old with my aunt and uncle. And at 16 years old, my aunt and uncle decided to move back to Toronto. I moved here from Toronto, Brampton, Ontario. And at 16, they decided to leave London because of the fact they felt it was too racist and too white were their exact words, And at that time, they asked me if I wanted to come along, and I said, no, I wanted to stay in London. And when my aunt asked me why I wanted to stay, I said it was for those exact reasons, because of the fact it was too racist and too white. I felt like it was important for me to stay here to break that stigma, you know what I mean? Because I believe there's a lot of good white people or other races that live in this city that want to see my culture and our culture be a part of the community as well,
Okay, you talk about sharing your experiences.
Yeah.
Have you ever had experiences that you would consider negative to living in Ontario, in London?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had some pretty rough experiences myself. I mean, from young, I started out at a school, Banting Broncos. That was in White Hills in London here. And I mean, I literally came to school on November 1st, 1994. I got to the school. And prior to that, I've never been in any trouble in school or anything like that. I got to school, let's say it was Monday morning, and the basketball coach approached me in school and said to me, "We know who you are. We know what school you went to in Brampton. We want you to be at basketball tonight, you know, for the practice for our team." Yeah. I went to practice, and obviously being a new kid and whatnot, I still wanted to impress the coaches, so I went there and tried my hardest and really balled up, you know. After practice, one of the players approached me and literally said to me, "Why do you N-words think you could come to our school and take over the basketball team?" You know, that was my very first experience in London, Ontario, directly my first day here, you know. And from that, there was a couple other incidents that happened from there, you know. But I believe that with every experience, it was a learning lesson for me directly, you know.
How did you react?
Yeah, that particular time I didn't react well, honestly. If you want to know exactly what happened, I actually reacted in a negative way, and I physically assaulted the other student, which led to me being sent to the office. At that time, the principal approached me and asked me what happened. I explained to him what happened. He was totally on my side up to that point until I explained to him where I lived, which I didn't even know exactly where I lived. He asked me where I was from, and I remember the closest street to where I lived was called Limberlost. So I said, "Oh, I live in Limberlost," but I didn't live in Limberlost. I lived around Limberlost, but but the moment Limberlost came out of my mouth, his exact words were, "Oh, you're one of those kids." Yeah. And then it led to me being suspended and sent home. When I went home and told my aunt the story, she literally marched me back to school, and the very next day I was back in class. You know what I mean? Because of the whole experience, right?
Okay. So which one of your kids was the first one to come and say, "Hey, Dad, I'm having problems"?
Yeah, like I remember my daughter coming to me. You know, her mom is Canadian, white, born in Kamoka. I remember her coming to me and saying, "Dad, you know, sometimes I feel like a lot of the kids, you know, make racial comments towards me, and like I feel like she sometimes would even explain to me that she doesn't understand that she should be acting more white, let's say, or more black or whatnot," and sort of wanted to hear my explanation of that. And I always told her, "Listen, you should never forget the fact that you are half black and half white. You know, you should take the good things from white people and the good things from black people and make it yourself. You know, both races have negative stereotypes and mentalities behind them, but both races have amazing people that exist within them too. So if you find the amazing qualities within each race, then and make that you, and that's what you should focus on. You know, and that's what I tell my kids even today. You know." Celebrate the fact that you are half white and half black. That's amazing. To me, that's a blessing. You get to learn the best of both cultures and make it you.
Okay. What would your daughter's mom say?
Yeah, like
what was her reaction?
A lot of the times that she would be upset and almost surprised and kind of shocked because, you know, she's coming from a different walk of life where she sometimes doesn't feel like those things exist or doesn't want to believe it exists to that extent, you know what I mean? So it's a little bit shocking to her, you know what I mean? Which I can understand. So a lot of times she would let me sort of take the lead in that when it comes to explaining how to handle those things, but she always supported what I said and she believed the same way I believe that, you know what? It's not about skin color, it's not about hair texture, it's about your heart and your mind. And we always push that on our kids. Great people exist in all walks of life. It doesn't matter what their hair and their skin color and their eye color is, it's about their heart and their mind. So we raise our kids that way, focusing on those things, you know?
Okay. What was the last time one of your kids came and said they had a problem?
The last time? Not too long ago, actually. I remember my son came to me, actually. He lives in a townhouse complex. Yeah. And there's another kid that lives in the complex, too. And he was saying how the kid was calling him the N-word. Yeah. And this is a kid I seen him play with and stuff like that, right? And I know the kid as a good kid. He's a white kid. I played ball with my son and this kid together. I know the kid's parents. I don't think they're bad people and stuff like that. I was sort of a little surprised by it, to be honest, like that this kid said that. But I sort of knew that these young kids say those things because they hear those things. Yeah. You know, they listen to the videos. They go on YouTube. Remember when me and you were kids? We used to watch much music and we didn't get to see it so raw as how our kids are getting it right now. So they're seeing all the things and it's not censored, and you know what I mean? So they're hearing it raw, and they're thinking it's okay to use those words. You know, he might even have heard my son say those words and thinking that it's okay because he's friends with my son. So I had to explain to my son, just because you are half black doesn't give you the right to call yourself that or to use those words, right? You gotta I had to sit down with my son and explain to him the origin of that word, where it came from, why it changed, why it became what it is. And like they said, knowledge is the key, right? You know, I remember telling my son one time, saying to him, listen, Martin Luther King, who we all look up to as black people, once said, the scariest thing to a racist white man, not a good white man. A good white man is like me and you, a good black man. But the scariest thing to a racist white man is an educated black man. Once you know your right and you know your worth, no one can call you anything and have you lose your cool or overreact. I explained to him, I've seen a lot of young guys lose their life, lose their job, lose their position because of words, hot air being thrown at them, and then they react to it, and then what happens? Not the person who sends the words, it's the reaction to the words, you know what I mean, that gets the consequences. So I try to steer my sons to not react to when someone calls you that. When someone calls you that, you should feel sorry for them. You should almost look at them with sorry, because that means their mind is in a prison, you know, it's in a tunnel.
Okay. You know, as part of this show, we always have people that are online, so I want to say a very special shout out to everybody that's online with us right now. One of my usual co-hosts is she's online as well. So for all the people online, you are able to comment, leave comments, you can ask questions, we'll try to answer them for you. And of course, there's the call in at 519-694-3429. You can call in and we will definitely answer questions. We're here with Kwame Lambert of United Cuts, and he's talking a little bit about the challenges of being a parent. I guess from the first to the last, they've all had their difficulties, and most of it is centered around people calling him the N-word, right? Yeah. And so I'm going to ask you a little bit about race relations. You've been in London for so long, right? Does it surprise you that and you would say the last time was about a year ago or a little bit under? Right. Do you surprise that in 2020 and 2021 you're still getting that? You know,
it's shocking to me that I always say this, especially when I'm talking to the kids, because I do coaching and stuff like that, and the kids always agree with me that it's shocking to me that in 2021 I have to explain, especially to an adult, you know, that I have to explain to an adult that they should treat all human beings as equals. Where should the sentence even go past that? You know what I mean? That we as people should not treat each other as equals. Like, I can't believe that we're still having this discussion in 2021. Because I can remember back in 1998 getting sent to the office, where we had a big thing at school where they had these big buttons you used to wear. It says, "Let's stop racism," you know? And I used to say, I don't want to wear the button because I know that racism will never stop. Racism is motivated by ignorance and hatred and all those things that are always going to exist in people. But I think the button should say, don't let racism stop us, because that's where we fall short. When we let racism come between us as people, like you let one racist person walk into this room and separate all the good people in here because of one racist view, that's where we let them win, and we shouldn't allow that. We shouldn't allow, like I tell my black brothers who sit in my chair, I tell them, listen, bro, just because you met one racist white person, it doesn't mean you should judge every white person by that brush. Because in my experience, if I met one racist white person, I met 100 amazing white people who would do anything for me, who would take their shirt off their back for me, because I'm a good person and they're a good person, you know? And so that's why you shouldn't let one negative experience cloud your judgment about every person or everyone you come across, you know what I mean?
And I'm going to take that as a final thought from Kwame Lambert. I want to thank you for being part of this, right? These conversations usually continue, whether we do it next week, next month. This is going to be part of a series, right? So we're going to invite you back. Once again, this has been Kwame Lambert from United Cuts Hair Salon here in London, Ontario. Once again, I like to show the rest of the room, so I'm going to invite somebody else to the room. But before we show the rest of the room, once again, thank you.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Of course, and people, you can't see the room now because I'm not showing it to you, but I get to pick on somebody, and I've got my son is pointing to his mom, right? So I guess at this point, it's going to get a little personal. So I'm gonna get Tyus up here too. So you know what, Ashley McGuire. Yeah. And before you come, as I like to tell everybody, please get your mics checked and everything, right? Once again, the conversations about the biracial experience, at times it's being called a race in a race. There's so many trials, there's so many tribulations. One of the things that usually happens is, at a certain point in life, the child and it's right, the child has to make a decision about which direction they're going into. Sometimes because of peer pressure and circumstances, they choose one way. Sometimes it's caused them to not disown their culture, but move away from it because sometimes there are parents that haven't explained it enough. And we talked to Kwame, and it seems that Kwame has, explained to his kids the importance of both cultures, the black aspect, the white aspect. Sometimes it gets deeper than that, not just a black and white issue. Sometimes it actually takes on the connotations of a country or even a continent. So the African experience and the Caribbean experience sometimes is different. Well, right now I'm going to welcome Ashley McGuire. And this is going to be personal, people, because then I get to talk about my parenting skills, and it's going to come out if I did good, if I'm not doing good. And I think I should also invite Tyus. Yeah, I'm going to get you to, Tyus is telling me, like, you know what, he's my cameraman, so he's choosing to stay as my cameraman. And I'm going to welcome Ashley. So this is the conversation we never had. So here, people, this is the conversation you know what? And I'm lying. We have had these conversations. We've had, I don't know, quite a few incidences that we've had to deal with, right? I get to say I'm like the peacemaker, not the peacemaker. I'm like the calm person, right? And Ashley is the one that's like, my kid, they're saying stuff to my kid. I'm not having none of this. I'm not having it, right? So I get, you get to check your mic out and say,
check 1, 2.
ooh, that's hey, this is not my DJ thing. This is my real talk, straight talk.
Am I working? Hi, everyone.
All right. Yeah, you can say, hey, everybody can say hi, Ashley. Let me hear it. Hi, all right. We didn't do it for Kwame because, we discriminate here, right? So, all right. So I'm going to get into, parenting. What's been the hardest part about raising two biracial kids?
I think probably just like the way that they're treated,
Okay.
like differently. Like as soon as our son walks into the room, he's not associated as being mixed. He's black. Where our daughter walks in the room, if you didn't know her dad, people assume she's white when she's not. Even herself, we had the conversation not too long ago about racism and stuff like that, and she even said, well, they're not racist to me, I'm not even black.
Right.
And I had the conversation with her yes, you are. And she's like, no, I'm not. I look just like you, Mom, I'm white. And I'm like, yeah, but your dad is black and I'm white, so that makes you mixed. So you're half black and half white. And she's like, if you say so, but my skin says otherwise.
And therein goes the first time I haven't addressed something with one of my kids. And so that leaves it up to me now to go in and address the issues, right? My son, who we could address it independently and together because, it's so, you can look at him and know that he's black. And now you told me, and I've been dreading the day to actually have to sit down because it's such a different conversation than the one that I had with Tyus, right? And it wasn't really a conversation as much. It was more of addressing the issues.
Yeah.
But with my daughter, it seems like I have to go in now and, talk about the trips that we took with her to Jamaica to show her certain things and to, let her know why it's so relevant, right? So here we've had two guests, and it seems like, you know, and pretty well one of the biggest issue is always going to be a matter of the N-word and the adjustments that have to be made. What adjustments have you had to make? And I'm going to talk about my adjustments, but the adjustments have you're having to make.
Like, I think with like our son, because he looks black, he has more of the issues with school, in sports, like racial issues, where our daughter hasn't experienced any of that.
Yeah. And it's crazy, people. In 2019, right? Yeah, it's got to be 2019. 2019, and I'm not going to say what the team was, right? But he was playing soccer in 2019, and there were some incidences that we actually had to file a report. We sent some emails back to the people that were running the team.
Yeah, the soccer club.
Yeah, the soccer club. We sent a couple of emails. They said that they lost it and all kinds of stuff that, you know, and it never got resolved in the way that it should have been resolved. It should have been resolved.
Yeah.
And part of that, I'm going to take some of that blame too, because it's sometimes you want to know how far that you should push, right?
Yeah.
And in relation to that, it's like, it's my kid and he's got to play soccer in this league and he might not play for this team. So how far do I go?
Yeah.
Am I doing him a disservice? And sometimes, you know, it makes you feel a little bit of, not a failure, but you've let something down when you don't take it to the full extent.
Yeah.
And you understand the politics of situation.
And it's hard because even there are like black men that worked for the club,
Yeah.
and it was them that told me, just leave it alone. That's how black people get treated. And I was like, you can't tell me that. Like, you alone can deal with it like that if that's how you want to deal with that, but you can't tell me as a mother to just ignore the fact that it's not little kids. It started with little kids.
Yeah.
Like making fun of or asking questions about like the color of his skin, like ignorant things. I took it to the coach and I said, listen, we don't play when it comes to this type of stuff. Either you deal with it or I'll deal with the parents. I left it alone. It happened again. I went and dealt with it again. And then it was an adult. And that's where like the issue got bigger, and then it just turned into a whole bunch of things. And the people in the club that were like men of color were just like, that's what he's gonna have to deal with for the rest of his life. Just tell him to get used to it and just let him play. And I was like, no, like I'm not gonna allow somebody to treat me as a grown woman the way that I was being treated because I'm the mother of a black child. I sure in hell is not gonna let somebody make my son feel uncomfortable coming onto a field that I paid hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars for him to play on. And it just came to a point where they were just like, look, he can't play anymore. And then it got to a point where, do we take it like to a legal point or do we walk away? And that's a hard decision to make too, because like, where do you draw the line? How far do you take it? Because again, London isn't Toronto. It's not like we live in Mississauga and we can go play over in Brampton and nobody will know what happened. Like, everybody in the soccer community knows. Everybody in the schools know. Same thing with him at school. There's issues at school, you go deal with it. Oh, kids will be kids. And I'm like, no, like, if you're calling my kid an idiot or a retard or something like that, okay, kids will be kids, deal with it like that. But when you're bringing racial stuff into it, like, that's just taking it too far. You can't tell me kids will be kids and just expect me to be like, okay, you dealt with it.
And then, you know, what conversations you think we should be having? And this is putting
with
us
each
up,
other,
not only with each other, but with our kids. And this is so, like I said, this is one of the reasons this is, you know, this show is such a personal thing sometimes.
Yeah.
And, you know.
You know, it's hard because even when Matthias was as young as in kindergarten, he was getting bullied by white kids, like non-white kids, but not black kids. And it was me that straight up told him, because it was an incident where a kid in his class, and these are 4-year-old kids, every day he goes to school, this kid is trying to fist fight him on the yard, and I raised my son, you don't put your hands on people. And then I go and talk to the teacher. It got to the point where I went and sat down with the principal and I was like, listen, this is an everyday occurrence. Then it got to the point where there's fist fights happening. My son's not defending himself because I'm telling him not to. And then my son is getting punished for getting hit. And I was like, wait. And then it's me, the crazy white mom, in my car at recess, driving past the school to see if what my son is telling me is the truth. And there he is with his face up to the wall, like he's in timeout for getting punched. And then I have to go to the school and cause an issue.
And I'm going to hold you for a second because one of the things that usually happens is that we have people that call in.
Okay.
Welcome to Real Talk, Straight Talk. You're on the line and now you're live. Who am I speaking with?
You're speaking with Biracial. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I had a question and a comment.
Okay.
So my question is for the lovely lady beside you. As someone that I have done some work with biracial children only, because I do work with Black children, I've had an issue with trying to include biracial children into the different programs, the different resources, the different things that I do, mainly based on the inability for me to communicate with the mother. And so having you there, my main question would be, is there a community of white women with Black children? And also, do you think you were well prepared to have a Black child?
Okay. All right. So 2 questions. She wants to know if you were well prepared to have a Black child, and is there a community of white, let me get this right, a community of white women that have Black children in terms of a community. I'm going to assume that you mean like a community group, right? Yep, there are groups there are groups on Facebook, right? There are groups on Facebook. And as for the second question, do you think you were prepared to have, were you prepared?
I don't think that I was prepared for everything that was going to come with having a biracial child. I remember our son being 6 months old is the first time that I ever experienced racism, I guess. Like I saw it like growing up in school, but like directly to myself. I was driving home from Toronto on the 401. One of my good friends' mother had just passed away, so I had given them a ride up to say their final goodbyes, and we were just coming back home. Again, my son was 6 months old in a car seat. We were pulled over, and the police officer was like, "What are you doing on the road?" Blah, 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 blah. And then when he put his flashlight on our son, he actually called him the N-word, baby. Like, what are you doing on the road with your N-word baby? And I was like,
oh my gosh.
Excuse me? Like, I was literally just shocked, and I didn't even know what to do. I literally rolled up my window to the point where I could slip the paperwork out and told him, I no longer feel comfortable conversating with you, whatever it is that you have to do, why you pulled me over, go back to your car and do it and let me go home, or call your supervisor. Those are your choices. After that happened, he gave me a ticket for speeding. I wasn't even speeding. I took it to court, filed a complaint, and nothing ever came of it. The ticket wasn't even filed. When I went to court to fight it, it wasn't even there.
The funniest thing, we just talked about this.
Yeah, we literally just had
we just had this conversation the other day.
Like, I wasn't prepared to have to like fight for my child. Like, every mother has to fight for their kids, like everything, but I wasn't prepared for the type of fights that I would have to put up with. Like, yeah, it's hard.
And so how can, because personally for me, like something that I say all the time is like based on my own personal mission and what I am trying to do within my community, that even biracial children are part of it because they have black in them. And so dealing even with, white men or white women who have these biracial children is going to be extremely important because as much as there is this disconnect sometimes when it comes to biracial versus full black. So I'm in a neighborhood that has a lot of biracial children, and I got into a little situation with a neighbor here because, when the little kids come to my doorstep, I'm there giving them their affirmations. Yes, beautiful black queen. Yes, you're awesome. And one of the mothers, because she wasn't addressing her son as black, was upset with that, and so that caused a little bit of friction. And things like that are happening all the time. And I don't even know how to, being someone that helps black children, that works for the black community, that's looking to do things just for, to advance the community. I'm like, how do I position myself when I'm helping biracial children? How do I reach mothers? Is it that, are white women angry towards black women? Or what is it? Because I've had such negative experiences, other than, the black girl that's like, oh yeah, my child is black, so I'm basically black. But other than that, I haven't had a lot of success in going forward and including biracial children in anything that I do. And it usually ends up a disaster. One, because I can't really speak to the kid with integrity because of what their parents are telling them. Are they black? Are they white? I don't know. So I don't know if you could give me any advice on that, being that you are on that side, being a white woman with black children.
Okay, thank you, Vodi.
Mm-hmm.
So much to answer. As we all know, this is a live show, and we do have kids in the audience. So occasionally we're gonna get one that decides that they're gonna, it's like modeling a little bit. So they get to come in front of the camera, show who they are, and that's the beautiful thing about having a live show, right? Ashley, because you know what, here we are, and time is going, right? Obviously, there are things that we still need to talk about. So I guess I'm gonna have to say that there is gonna, as with this show, this is one of those shows that's gonna turn into part 2 because there's so many things to talk about. So I'm gonna hold you for next week, right?
Okay.
And the reason is because there's other questions that I wanna ask you. Evodi asked about if you were prepared. And then I gotta talk about if, when you have a relationship and there's 2 people involved, it's not just up to one person to be prepared, right? It's both people having to prepare each other for what's coming up, right? Mm-hmm. So I think my answer to that is going to be next week. So once again, I want to thank Ashley for being part of Real Talk, Straight Talk. Yeah, we'll do this next week. Got another guest to bring up, got another one to bring up, and yeah, here we go.
No. You can post it down. Post it down there.
Shout out to all the people tuning in from United Cuts Hair Salon, right? Welcome to Real Talk, Straight Talk. People, I have Melissa in the studio, and Melissa has been one of our biggest supporters since we did this. She's listened to, let me see, and can we show Melissa, please? Yeah, all right, Melissa. Hi, Melissa, all right. Okay, so Melissa's been there since you listened to the midday mix. You've been with us since we've actually started, right? Yeah, biggest supporters. So to have you on the show, thank you first of all, and your daughter, right? She's looking right at the camera. Hi.
Look at her.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
So what's up?
Nothing much.
All right, all right. Continuing with bringing up biracial kids, right? Anything you ever taught your kids?
I mean, I've always just told her, people are people, no matter what.
Okay.
It doesn't matter skin color. Just like Q said, it really doesn't matter. We don't judge based on skin color, hair type, color of eyes. People are people. You love people for who they are and what they have inside. That's it. I've never had an issue with her, and she's never had any issues out there that I know of. At least she's never come to me.
She's never.
She loves everybody.
All right. No. So then it comes into. Then my question is, okay. So outside of being black, right? Do you ever get down to, if you want to call it the nitty gritty of, her father, as to her father's background, their heritage? So it's one thing to just identify and say, yes, you know what, this will happen. But then I think there needs to be the added conversations of okay, so I'm Canadian, this is my background. You know, what is your background?
My background?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. A little bit of everything.
Okay.
Got the Irish, Scottish, French.
Right. So then, yeah, so the initial conversation is about being black, and then the next conversation, because if you're going to help the situation and if you're going to allow kids to truly understand what it means to be black, you have to go back to their heritage, right? A normal white child doesn't have to really go through that because history is there, and it's so, their history is always being told, right? Whereas with black history, you get little snippets, right? And black history to me only really truly encompasses slavery. You never usually get what happened before slavery, right? So then it then becomes of how do you teach your children to be proud? How do you teach them to truly identify and with who they are?
See, and that is kind of where I struggle. Obviously, I'm not super educated on the history myself. I mean, I have enough knowledge that I can hope I'm passing on enough to her, and her dad's Canadian. Her dad was born here, so it makes it a little bit tougher too for us to really get into all that with her.
Yeah.
We try. Yeah. I try to instill what I know. She reads books. We watch documentaries. We do talk to her about the slavery aspects and a little bit of the history, but there's only so much I can really teach her.
Okay.
I mean,
so, and
with her dad being Canadian, he's not really.
So you think that's the biggest challenge is
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to thank you for sharing. Anybody that shared, it's good to share the positives, but to actually have to share the negatives, it takes a lot. So
I'll be the first one to say I'm not as knowledgeable as I should be, especially having a half-black child. I should be more knowledgeable, but I mean.
What do you think that you should teach her? And I'm only asking so that if there's anybody that's out there that's watching and wants to know or wants to, that's in the same boat that, I don't expect everybody to be in the same boat of, we've gone through this. There are a lot of people that simply don't know what the next steps are.
And I'm probably one of those people.
Well,
I mean, what I try to teach her, she's still young. I mean, she doesn't need to know the nitty-gritty, as you said, really. I mean, introduce it in steps, I think. But right now, she knows a little bit about the culture. She knows the cultural differences. She's actually right into it, the food, the music, the ways of living. She understands how in Jamaica, at least where her dad's from, or where my husband's from, my husband's not her father. They don't have the luxuries that we have here. She understands it's a different way of life. I mean, right now, those are the things that we focus on. Later on, I have to dig deeper with her, but she's still, she shows interest. So I address what she shows interest in right now, and we kind of just take it from there. We're a little bit different. We kind of just go with the flow, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a matter of, like, when I ask people to come on this show, it's not to judge, it's just to get the point of views, right? And to express it to all the people that are out there that need a little help, right? Clearly, clearly, I think I think Kwame is the one that's doing the best job so far, right? Because hey, I can say there are things that I have to address, right? Melissa, I want to thank you for coming. Oh, and Michael, let me ask a final question. How is Michael about explaining stuff?
I lean on Michael. Michael's still kind of new here, so
Yeah.
everything's still very much in him, and he does pass it on to her. He always.
And I asked,
You were
and
in
I-
Jamaica.
I know Michael, and I know Michael is a super person, right? The best thing that could ever happen is when you have the support of the other person beside you, right, to explain all these things, right? I've got one more guest, so people, I think there's going to be a part 2. Obviously, there's going to be a part 2 because we still have, there's so many other questions that that I've got to ask and answer. Thank you to Evodi for all the questions that she had. I want to thank you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Oh yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Once again, as we continue with the biracial experience, we can see the benefits of having two people explain and get into not only the history and all and what it means to be black and what it means to be white, because there's two things. One of the things that I haven't touched on is in the black community itself, how the biracial kids are accepted or not accepted. I remember taking my kids to Jamaica. And it was such a different experience for them, right? Because where I took them to, they were simply embracing a whole different way. I remember there were so many women that were trying to braid my daughter's hair and stuff like that. She was like, I forget how old she was. I think she was like 3 or 4 when we first took her. All right, and then we took her again 2 years later. Tyus was a whole different story. He's a little quiet and stuff, right? But Maria, they were always trying to braid her hair and give her gifts. So we came back with gifts and all that from Jamaica. However, in Canada it was a whole different story because, like I said, my son has had a few issues. My daughter hasn't had the same issues. And now I'm going to welcome some more people to the chairs. And these are the chairs that I love, and I had to settle for this chair. It's all right. That's what it means to be a host. Right? Lovely ladies. I love when ladies get on the show because, right? And so, hey, it's always a beautiful thing. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Kendra.
Yes. Kendra. Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And I know you've just been introduced to the podcast, like this is your 3rd week, right?
Yeah.
How do you like the podcast so far?
No, I
know
love
you
it.
watch.
I love this subject especially.
Okay.
It's dear to me.
I know you haven't been introduced unless your mom has been like, Kendra, you got to watch this podcast.
She talks about it. Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm going to start. I know Kelly will get to you in a second.
No.
Is there any questions that you've ever had to ask about being biracial?
I think somebody brought it up earlier, but it's the question of, do I need to act more black or more white?
Okay.
Because I think there's a lot going on. It's hard to get it out. But growing up, I grew up in Cambridge, Ontario, actually.
Okay.
We were one of very few black families in Cambridge, especially like at my school. That's kind of your world when you're little, right? So I didn't have any examples of it really, and I think I was a bit, as they call, whitewashed growing up there. And I had a lot of friends that they would make comments that, they weren't trying to be racist, but they would always say you're not, like, why can't you dance like the black people dance? Or why can't you twerk? Like, I just can't twerk, right?
Yeah.
Terrible at it. But then obviously you're never white when you're half black.
Right.
You're never going to fit in with the white people. I wanted to have, bangs and red hair and freckles when I was little because I wanted to fit in with all the kids around me, and you're just never going to be one or the other.
Right.
in that sense. So that was the question that I always kind of had. How am I supposed to act?
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think we've dealt with the race issue in the sense of the negativity that comes, but we haven't really touched on and this is the actual topic, how do they fit in? Is there anything that you think your mom should have explained? I'm not trying to put her on the spot. Is there anything that you think she should have explained more? Is there anything you think your father should have explained more?
That is a difficult question to answer in front of my mother. I don't think, and even a few minutes ago when we were talking and she said she doesn't think that there has been issues, I don't think that they're aware, because even my brother tends to kind of push it down and kind of ignore it, where I'm a little bit more sensitive to microaggressions and just things that people don't think are racist. Like my nickname in elementary school used to be Aunt Jemima, and that kind of stuff, that I'm not good. I would never go home and tell my parents that bothered me. And it took a while, I think, to think about it, to know why it bothered me myself. So I don't think that they did a bad job. I think they were just ignorant because they didn't know what I was experiencing. Neither of them are half black. Yeah. Right.
And once again, this is not a referendum on how your parents did.
Yeah, of course.
Right. I think one thing that we all experience, and I'm in the same. That's why when I'm willing to talk about my faults and the things that I should have done better. It's very hard because sometimes you don't know what you should talk to your kids about. And sometimes you're waiting for them to address things with you, and if they don't address it, so it depends on the relationship you have with your mom and with your dad.
Right.
And so now I'm gonna turn to Kelly.
Well, and we weren't together too.
Yeah.
That's another thing to mention.
Okay.
And I think with her brother, I feel like her brother identified more strongly as black than she did. Am I right? The music choices, the friends, the way he just comported himself. So I think, and being a boy, he was more aggressive. If he had any problems, he was more aggressive against them. So that's what I feel about him. And I think she doesn't agree with me, but he slightly looks more black than she does, where people would ask her, what are you?
I don't look
Brazilian?
black.
Are you?
I don't look,
Yeah, like her brother, you could identify a little more than her, and she gets to be the mystery person. No one quite knows what she is.
Which can be a good thing, but it can be a bad thing too. I mean, how many times, and I've told this story over and over, but I'm a server. I serve tables as a side job, and I have for 10 years, and there's been I can't count how many times tables have sat there and betted on my race. They'll straight up say at the end of service, they'll say to me, hey, we've been all placing bets on what your race is. What are you? And it feels when you're standing there at the table, it doesn't feel good. It's not great, but nobody knows what you are, and so they kind of can just fit you into whatever box. They know you're not white, so they can be aggressive towards you in any way that they want, really, I feel, in that situation, too.
There was a time when her brother was the only black kid, I guess, in the high school in Dundas, Ontario. Okay. And he actually used it to his advantage. He used it to, girls were following him all over the place. And he was the guy that all the girls wanted. He was the coolest kid in the school. So sometimes it's funny how right?
Man, that's so different because when I first came to Canada, I was one of 3 in the school, right? And I tell the story, the girl, she didn't want to do anything to do with anybody that was fresh off the boat. So there was 2 of us and we were fresh off the boat. And so the other guy was, I think, I can't remember correctly, it's been so long, but I think he might have fit in a little better. I think my accent at that time was so heavy. And I remember people saying that I would tell jokes, and I remember people saying that they laugh not at the jokes just because the accent made it sound funny because they couldn't understand. So I can relate to that.
In their case, they're Canadian though.
Yeah.
And so they don't have that fresh off the boat thing to deal with. And then when we talk about the features again, where you were talking about your daughter versus your son and the different problems between them. I mean, where the features, where do they trail off enough that you don't get that kind of racism against you, because if you look at Kendra's son here,
Yes.
he's a quarter black because his dad's Portuguese. So does he look like he's mixed, or so where does it end? Like how do you? I think it's interesting though.
Yeah.
That the physicality of it is what people first judge you on, right?
Yeah.
So the features are more black, then you're more black, then, so.
How is, Kendra, let me get back to you for a minute. How is you not being able to identify with either? How has that influenced your choices? Do you find yourself leaning to one as opposed to the other? Have you been able to walk down the middle, or?
Like, I mean, I kind of just want to be myself
Yeah.
and not have people say you're not enough of this or you're not enough of this, you know?
Mhm.
Like, I don't know, yeah. I mean, even people would make comments about my dad growing up. I mean, he was black, fully black, but he grew up in Oakville, Ontario. So, you know, they would come over and they'd be like, yeah, but your dad's not really black, you know?
He didn't really act black.
Yeah.
He didn't.
He still doesn't act black. He doesn't dress black. Like, so, I don't know. I mean, I would defend him. I'd say, you know, he is who he is. Like, I kind of just want to be myself, and I don't want it to be a question of race. I was brought up the way I was brought up, and that's who I am, and I don't want to do a disservice to blackness,
Yeah.
but I'm not trying to be anything that I'm not, and
Yeah.
this is me, and I am half black, and I don't think there should be a definition to it, you know.
Okay. And as much as there shouldn't be a definition, unfortunately, society is not about to, you know, leave us without having to give a definition of things, right? Once again, one of the biggest issues I think also comes back to us as black people. We tend to look at the biracial issue in different lens. I think we're going to continue this conversation next week, and where we talk about how it's from our community, how we do look at it, whether we accept it, whether we don't. And I can say 100% there's some that have accepted it and some that don't. There is also, I think, one of the things Evodi had talked about is how the children look at black women, because at times black women also look at the kids in a different light as well too. So all those dynamics we're gonna get into next week, right? Getting back to, and I'm gonna ask you this is the final question. Is there anything else that you think you should have told Kendra? No, and I'm gonna base this on, like, you guys just had a little conversation, I guess, before during this show, little things that you were talking about. Is there anything you think that you missed out?
Like she said, she didn't communicate any issues.
Okay.
I think her brother did.
Yeah.
In fact, he did in Calgary. He had an incident. And in fact, also in southern Italy, when I lived with him in southern Italy, we had quite a few incidents in Italy. It was actually seemed worse than Canada.
Wow.
In a lot of ways. But no, I can't really say.
You know what? I got to invite you guys back next week, because I'm interested in the incident in the incidences, not only Calgary but Italy, because it gives us a completely different perspective. It gives us another thing, another continent.
Because they're a society of one culture, where we're a society of many
Right. So
cultures.
I need to explore that a little bit more. Kendra and Kelly, thank you for being part of the show. I want to thank all my guests for being part of the show. My camera people are telling me that we've got like 2 minutes, and my clock is telling me that we're actually over. So to Kwame, United Cuts, to Melissa, to Ashley, to Kendra, to Kelly, thank you for being here. We're coming back with this next week, and this is what we do. What we call this? We call this a fade to black, no pun intended. Thank you. Oh, I get to wave at the camera. Yeah, all right.
Okay, Bubba, come here. Come here.